If you've ever wanted to lose all your friends in Magic the Gathering, or make people cry, or make people wish they never played with you, then I can't recommend Grazilax, Illithid Scholar, the commander of a mono blue tempo deck, any more than anything else. This deck is nasty, it is mean, it will make people's days bad, but most of all, it's fun, very fun, and it requires tight and skillful play. It's very budget friendly, and I would love to get into it. So the deck is built with a number of categories. And the first thing we have to do is we have to have 20 evasive one drops. This will make about a fifth of our deck just one drop creatures that have flying or are unblockable. Now, there's a lot of tight competition space. There's a lot of really bad and a lot of really good evasive creatures. Wingcrafter can turn other creatures that we have that are not evasive into evasive creatures, specifically our commander Grazilax. Siren Stormtamer maintains value throughout the entire game, being able to sacrifice itself and counter a spell or ability that targets you or a creature you control is a very powerful effect indeed. Especially being able to hit abilities is not something that is very common. Flitterwing Nuisance is a newer card from Lorwyn Eclipsed, and its ability to turn itself into like a piracy or a coastal piracy effect for a turn is really strong. It's also just a flying 1/1 that you can play on turn one. It's it's a really good card, and there's many other good cards in the deck just like it. Now, the next thing that we have is we round out the rest of the decks. We have around 30 creatures, and 10 of them are 2 drops. Now, the 2 drop space is even tighter. With just 10, we need to make sure that every 2 drop is contributing to our plan and very efficiently. So we have a couple of tempo plays, like Merfolk Trickster or Flood Pitch Rounder. We can use these kinds of creatures to remove a creature from our opponent or disable an ability at a very crucial time, especially because our Grazilax commander will allow it to sometimes come back into our hand if they're blocked, or they can just become a creature that swings for damage. We also have Emrakul's Messenger. We have Mischievous Mystic. These kinds of creatures will allow us to create a little dude every time we draw our second card each turn. Usually we can't do this on other people's turns, but doing it just once on our turn is good enough already. Now, the deck runs 10 to 15 counterspells. The most synergistic counterspell is definitely the Fear of Imposters. Being able to counter a spell on ETB while being a creature, then you can swing for it. If somebody is forced to block it, then we can simply use Grazilax's ability to put it back into our hand, and then we get another counterspell. That's pretty cool. We have regular counterspells. Generally speaking, the counterspells in this deck have to be cheap, and they're very often narrow. The goal of the counterspells in our deck is to prevent game-winning combos. It is to prevent massive amounts of tempo from a single creature or a single spell, and it is also to prevent board wipes. We also have Foil, a free counterspell, and it works off of our mana base being entirely islands. We don't have any, because I'm a poor boy, we do not have anything like Force of Will or Pact of Negation or anything crazy like that, but those spells would definitely be a very good inclusion in the deck. There is one counterspell that we shouldn't be running called Swan Song, because we don't want to give our creatures, we don't want to give our opponents any creatures with flying. That would just be ridiculous. Now, we want to run as many coastal piracy effects as possible. There's 8 printed, I think, maybe 7. I don't own a copy of the Indomitable, but it would definitely have a home in here. We also run Starwinder and Waterbender's Ascension. Waterbender Ascension is really good. I don't think I've seen many people use it at all, but it's really strong in a deck like this. And the Starwinder it only lasts for 1 turn, and it costs the same as Coastal Piracy for the Warp. But I think that it's technically fine because it draws slightly more cards than a Coastal Piracy effect, because it's based off of the combat damage rather than the number of creatures that deal combat damage. So if any of your creatures deal more than 1 damage, you're immediately drawing more cards off Starwinder. Moving on, our ramp has to be cheap, and we don't play much of it. Right now, I have about 6 pieces of ramp in the deck. It's because our deck wants to play very aggressive creatures on turns 1, 2, and 3. We don't really need a whole lot of creatures or a whole lot of ramp. The ramp has to be very worth it. So something like a Soul Ring or a Sapphire Medallion or a piece of ramp that taps for a blue pip is going to be where the cutoff points are. The Silver Myrrh is a creature, so any creature-based ramp is also pretty strong because you can actually use it to swing for damage, at least in the early game. Later on, the Silver Myrrh is never getting through, but it's still going to be able to tap for blue mana. Now, we will have some very mean and very cheap interaction. Back to basics, Harbinger of the Seas. And some people will say that these cards are mass land denial and have no place in the lower brackets and are giga cringe or something like that, which I have to say, non-basic lands are pretty cringe. Anybody who's playing like those $7,000 mana bases for the 5-color Joda slop or even 3-color slop, I think that they deserve everything that's coming to them. I think that they deserve to have all their non-basic lands turned into things that they don't want, and I will drink their tears. Get bent, idiots. Now, how does the deck actually win? We have about 6 to 10 cards that I'm going to call showstoppers or big plays. They're going to win the game basically on the spot. So Teferi Temporal Pilgrim, when we have enough 1-drops and a Coastal Piracy effect, our deck is easily drawing 8+ cards a turn, sometimes 10 and sometimes more. Teferi Temporal Pilgrim can ult the turn it comes down and ult every turn after. You will break somebody just doing this to them repeatedly. Mirror Form can turn all of your evasive little 1-drops into the biggest creature on the board, and you can just kill everybody that way. Or you could turn all your 1-drops into, I don't know, like islands or something, and have 30 mana. You could... I honestly have no idea. This is a very janky and fun card from Morrowind. You could do a whole bunch of things with it. Secret of Bloodbending can be used to turn somebody else who has bigger creatures than you and use them to kill other players, and then you kill the guy you controlled with Bloodbending. Cyclonic Rift is Cyclonic Rift. You can definitely cut this if you're looking to be on a budget. I happened to open one like in 2012 or whenever Ravnica was out as a kid, and I've hung on to it, and that's why I have one. But I would definitely not buy one myself. That's crazy. Now, the mana base is basically all islands. I have a copy of a Blinkmoth Nexus because it can become a 1-drop creature. You could probably add the other like manlands that can become flying creatures. I think that a Reliquary Tower would be pretty good because the deck frequently has to discard down to hand size. Although it's not usually a huge problem. You don't really need all the cards you draw anyway. But yeah, having pure islands is completely fine. We don't need to spend some ludicrous sum of money on overpowered lands. Pretty cool. Now the plan, just to go over how the deck plays. Turns 1 and 2, we play aggressive 1-drops or 2-drops. Turn 3, we resolve Grassalax. And then on turn 4, we resolve, hopefully we get a Coastal Piracy effect. If we don't, that's fine. We're going to be drawing like 2 to 3 cards a turn anyways. And we just keep playing our lands, drawing cards until we get a Coastal Piracy effect. The deck gets really strong once you play something like that, because that's when you start to draw like 8 cards, like 10 cards, like even drawing 6 cards a turn. You're going to start hitting things. You're going to be playing off your land every turn. You're going to be getting counter magic. Now, once we're drawing, like, I would say more than 4 cards a turn, you technically have enough card advantage to be counterspelling every single player once per turn. You don't need to do this, but after you get this amount of card advantage, you want to hold up all your mana for counter magic. You can squeeze in a couple 1-drops here and there, but the counter magic is like the strongest point of the deck. You need to be holding it up until you hit a game-winning piece, something like a Teferi Pilgrim. And then once you hit a game-winning piece, you can either just cast, like, you can either tap out for it and then see how well you're doing, or you can recognize that you might need to wait a little bit, hold up your defenses a little bit longer, wait for 2 more islands, and then go for it. The free counter magic will always let you do this earlier, which is why it's so strong. But yeah, that's generally how the deck plays out. It's a pretty good game plan. There's a lot of points, skill tests for interaction. It's really tight. If you don't mulligan for those early turn plays, you can fall behind pretty quick. If you hold up the wrong kind of counter magic, or you don't hold up counter magic at a crucial time, your deck might fold. You need to really understand what's an important part of your game plan. You need to be paying attention to what every single person is casting. Every single time somebody resolves a spell, you ask to read it. You just do. And you either allow it or disallow, and it's kind of hard to tell what to allow and disallow. But generally, anything that's going to stop you from winning the game is worth countering, and anything that just looks like a value piece, it depends on how much value it brings, but it's usually not worth countering. All right, with that being said, here are some tips and tricks. So the politics of the deck are very fun, and they kind of play themselves. So this will usually revolve around players not wanting their stuff to be counterspelled. And the best deal that you could make is if you allow something through, they don't point it at you. That is the best deal that you can make because you're essentially forcing them to use it on other people and you kind of own that card. The other thing is that people who play these battle cruising decks with like big, like the big stompy creatures, if you allow them through on the premise that they won't attack you with them, and then like once it becomes a 1 versus 1, it'll be fine. There is so many like tempo plays in this deck to just bounce somebody's board that you can't really lose to it. Aetherize, Teferi's Temporal Pilgrim, Cyclonic Rift, all of these spells in the deck will make it impossible for people to really push combat damage on you. You can allow big creatures if people agree not to hit you with them before you're ready. Uh, we also want to note that Teferi Temporal Pilgrim, I've said it before, but it really can alt every turn, and it's super powerful. Uh, it's really fun as well. I'll also mention that in the late game, spot removal can't really stop you. Certain things you can counter, but there will come a point where you're so far ahead, you have such a big board that you don't actually need to counterspell single target removal spells anymore. It actually just doesn't matter. You would rather hold the counter magic up for something like a board wipe or a combo or somebody trying to go for a win or somebody resolving a spell that really locks you out of the game. Um, and the other thing about board wipes too is that it can actually be okay if somebody else board wipes. You can actually let it through if it helps you. The deck can very easily rebuild itself from a board wipe. If you have a bunch of cards in hand and you get board wiped, like you just resolve a bunch of 1-drops again, and you play a Coastal Piracy and you're back to business. It's really quick. And next thing is that Grazilax has an ability where, like, Grazilax has a couple niche interactions. So one thing about Grazilax is that you can get his ability to trigger maximum of 3 times if you have 3 opponents, or once per opponent. And you do this by attacking 3 different players and then getting 3 different triggers off of him. And the other thing is that there's a couple cards on the deck like Merfolk Trickster, Fear of Imposters, where you want to cast them and then attack with them as fast as possible, hoping that other people will block them so you can put the card back into your hand. And then you get its effect again. It's pretty cool. If you draw Aetherize, I have shown this card to people, like turned the card over and revealed it and said, I will blow you up with this if you swing at me. And then people don't want to swing at me anymore. And then I get immunity and it's really OP. You can really mess with people's heads with this card. And adding cards, now let's talk about like how to add cards or cut cards from the deck. So there's a couple cards in the deck like the Strata Scythe or some of the Mana Rocks that can just get cut. There are definitely better cards out there that can win the game faster, but these are the cards that I have to win the game. So feel free to cut those. There are some lands that are pretty OP that you could probably add. It might hurt the consistency of foil, like the free counter magic, but it should be okay. Otawara, Mystic Sanctuary, for example, are definitely auto includes. As Wizards prints more 1-drops, they can always be evaluated against the 1-drops already in the deck. And same with 2-drops. Any free counter magic that you have has a place in this deck. Specifically as well, the Planeswalker Kato Cunning Infiltrator, that is a win condition in this deck. And I don't have one, and I don't know where to get one. But yeah, you should probably put it in the deck. It's really strong. Yeah, the deck, as long as you follow the guidelines, 21 drops, 10 2-drops, 10 to 15 counter spells, like 6 to 10 haymakers, ramp, coastal piracy, and some really brutal interaction. The deck is pretty easy to build yourself. And lastly, let's go on to the forbidden technology, extra turn spells. Now, if you want, you could cut all of the, as I call them, showstoppers or win conditions and replace them with extra turn spells. And this will allow you to chain together extra turns, because if you're drawing 10 to 12 cards a turn and there's 10 extra turn spells in your deck, that means that each draw, oh, well, I don't want to do the hypergeometric distribution, but you're going to hit an extra turn spell basically every turn. This plays really similarly to a deck called Edric Turns in CEDH, except it's just worse because it's mono blue, and it's not, and Edric is a better card than Grazilax. But you can definitely set up something similar, and you can be viable, I think, in bracket 4. But This particular win condition is really annoying for other people to deal with. It's really mean. They just kind of they kind of just sit there and watch you play Magic, and they're not really allowed to scoop either because there's a chance you could fizzle and not hit an extra turn spell, and they could have a chance to win, but they probably don't. But they have to play for it, so they just sit there while you take all the turns and play Magic, and they play zero Magic. It's pretty awesome for a mono blue deck. That's the end. Bye.